Alabama is a blue blood in college football. The program is 134 years old and has eclipsed 985 wins since 1892. The greatest college football coach of all time left after the 2023 season, and Alabama has slid ever since. The dynasty and stability Nick Saban brought is gone, and everything that's followed now falls on Kalen DeBoer's lap. So I'll ask you this. Is Alabama's reign of dominance ending? Is the sport leaving them behind? Or is talent now distributed widely enough that the SEC can't separate the way it once did? The past few seasons have made something clear. College football is moving into a phase where the SEC, and Alabama in particular, can no longer control the sport the way they once did. Since the 2003 season, the SEC has won 14 national championships. For 2 decades, the conference ran the sport. That doesn't mean the SEC is irrelevant now, but the center of gravity has shifted. The last 2 champions came from the Big Ten, Michigan and Ohio State. And if Indiana wins on Monday, that would make 3 straight Big Ten titles and 3 consecutive championship games without an SEC team involved. But the thing is, that didn't happen during the peak of the SEC era. That shift also showed up this bowl season, where the SEC went 4-10 in bowl games. Before NIL, teams were making backdoor deals, cash in an Arby's bag, backroom handshakes, no-show jobs, and the conference with the most serial offenders, both proven and rumored, was the SEC. That doesn't mean other programs were clean. SMU had their fun in the 1980s. Southern Cal during the Reggie Bush era. Everyone has a history, but the SEC had an ecosystem that allowed it to hoard Southern talent and keep it close. Some of it showed up in NCAA reports. Some of it swirled in rumors and campus folklore, but it mattered because it created a reality where the South could stockpile talent without real competition. Now let's talk about a few schools that have dealt with their own scandals in the SEC. Auburn's issues go back decades. From 1987 to 1990, boosters paid Eric Ramsey, which eventually put the program on probation. Alabama followed this in the early 2000s, when booster Logan Young paid $150,000 to Albert Means, leading to a postseason bowl ban and multiple years of NCAA probation. In 2010, Auburn was back in the spotlight when Cam Newton's father allegedly solicited $180,000 for his son's commitment, a figure later confirmed by Mississippi State booster John Bond, even though the NCAA never proved that Auburn paid Cam directly. LSU ran no-show jobs through booster John Funes from 2012 to 2017. No-show jobs that spanned from Les Miles' era to Ed Orgeron's era. Hugh Freeze's Ole Miss handed out benefits and free apparel, as well as ending up with a postseason ban. And finally, from 2018 to 2020, Jeremy Pruitt's Tennessee staff gave cash to recruits on unofficial visits. And then there were the Dodge Chargers. Alabama players driving Chargers and posting them on the gram in the early 2010s. Everyone knew what was happening. The reality was right in front of us. Certain programs had insulation, but others didn't. That era is gone. Now we're in the NIL. Everyone can do what used to be done quietly. Rosters can be built in weeks. The transfer portal turned alumni money into the biggest factor in roster construction. Development still matters, but experience can be acquired faster than it ever could be before. You don't need Arby's bags anymore to move money around. Texas Tech is the clearest example. Cody Campbell, an oil billionaire, essentially revived the program. In 2025, they landed the #1 transfer portal class, won the Big 12, and made their first ever college football playoff appearance. It was a rapid turnaround driven by money arriving at exactly the right moment. Alabama is the clearest example of how SEC dominance used to work. What's happened there shows how much the sport has changed. Since Saban left, Alabama has been turbulent. NIL changed the job in ways he never had to deal with. The insulation Alabama relied on disappeared. The environment changed, and so did the Crimson Tide's recruiting pool. Alabama swiftly hired Kalen DeBoer from Washington, a coach that could develop and recruit at a high level, yet stepped into a job without the structural cushion that Alabama once had. A lot of the backlash comes from expectations that never adjusted after Nick Saban, not from anything unique to DeBoer himself. In his first season, Alabama went 9-4 and missed the playoff for the first time since 2019. They lost to Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, yet somehow beat #2 Georgia and crushed #14 LSU in Death Valley. The season ended with a loss to Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and for the first time since 2007, Alabama finished outside the AP Top 10. In 2025, DeBoer had more of his guys, including another top 3 recruiting class, but the season opened with a shocking 2-touchdown loss to unranked Florida State, while the Crimson Tide were ranked 8th in the nation. Then, the Crimson Tide rattled off 8 straight wins, including Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Tennessee. This was the Kalen DeBoer many expected, but it soon would later slip. A 2-point loss to #11 Oklahoma, a narrow Iron Bowl win, and a trip to Atlanta in the SEC Championship where the Georgia Bulldogs dismantled them 28-7. Alabama finished the game with 3 rushing yards. The Crimson Tide still made the playoff. They fell behind Oklahoma 17-0 in a rematch, yet responded, rallied, and won 34-24. During that game when they fell behind to Oklahoma, people on Twitter were already saying that DeBoer should have just taken the Michigan job. And that's a take that still lingers with the fan base. Then came the Rose Bowl. Bowl, number 1 Indiana versus Alabama. Indiana won 38-3, giving Alabama fans a bleak look into how thin the margins are, especially in the NIL era. Going into the 2026 season, Bama are being passed over in the portal and will lose quarterback Ty Simpson to the NFL draft. Scarily, they have the 50th ranked portal class at the time of writing, and despite having the 2nd ranked recruiting class, it's clear that experience now wins championships. The Crimson Tide are losing notable players like Isaiah Horton to Texas A&M and Keon Keeley to Notre Dame. 3 of their other players have already transferred to Ohio State, and NC State running back Hollywood Smothers even flipped from Alabama to Texas. And let me be very clear, this isn't a Kalen DeBoer problem. Alabama is simply the clearest illustration of what's happening across the sport. So why is this happening? Well, the answer sits with the changing landscape of college football. The SEC's dominance is thinning, not disappearing, but the Big Ten and non-traditional powerhouses are now fully involved because everyone can legally pay players. So why go to Alabama, a state with higher poverty rates and lower household income, if the money is similar elsewhere? How about College Station, Lubbock, even Eugene, Oregon, where Nike was founded? Tuscaloosa has football, but it no longer has the throne. For a lot of players, especially those from lower income backgrounds, NIL and the transfer portal mean they're no longer locked into the nearest powerhouse. They can find their value elsewhere. Look at the endowments of the Big Ten and other northern schools compared to Alabama. The Crimson Tide boast only an endowment of $2.3 billion. If you look at other northern schools like Notre Dame, theirs is above $18 billion. Michigan, above $18 billion. And there's more to follow. Endowments don't fund NIL directly, but they often signal alumni density and donor ceiling. That gap reflects a broader economic divide between northern and southern states, which matters more now that players aren't tied to their home regions. And Alabama draws from a state with a lower median household income, which matters when NIL asks are constant and widespread, something reflected in athletic director Greg Bjorn, who publicly urged the fan base to step it up financially. At a surface level, circle back to Texas Tech and Cody Campbell. Cody Campbell and his billionaire buddies have all the oil money in the world and can afford to reset a roster repeatedly. Oregon can lean on Nike, and California-based schools have Silicon Valley tech money. Alabama has been getting passed over by recruits, especially portal players, over the past few weeks, and those choices aren't even indefensible in 2026. Indiana is another example. Indiana has built a strong foundation for football. They have the largest living alumni base of any university in the country, which gives them a donor depth few programs can match. They also have football money tied to Mark Cuban. At this moment, they offer resources and a winning culture, which matters in a sport where players move quickly. To illustrate why Alabama and even SEC schools more broadly may start to slip relative to Big Ten programs, look at the economic data of SEC states. Louisiana ranks first nationally in share of population living in poverty at 18.9%. Alabama follows them, ranked 8th at roughly 14.6%. Northern schools, as well as Oregon, sit below 12%. And those are slight differences that do affect donor ceilings and long-term fundraising capacity. And they matter more now that players aren't bound to their home regions like they once were. So the SEC isn't going anywhere. It will always remain a top 2 conference, as we're probably heading towards a super conference era. But the era where one conference could dominate the sport for decades at a time is fading. Big Ten schools, along with programs like Texas Tech and Miami, are positioned to be regular fixtures at the top. The reign Alabama and Nick Saban held over the sport is ending. Recruits are already choosing other paths. Players switch schools in a blink of an eye. If a 5-star doesn't play immediately, he leaves. And that reality applies to everyone now. What we're seeing is how wide open the sport truly has become. Already, the SEC has programs pushing forward in different directions. LSU has Lane Kiffin and his recruits. Texas A&M and Texas look stronger by the day. Kirby Smart is still trudging along at Georgia. Ole Miss is Pete Golding and real playoff momentum after this season. This is a conference that remains strong, but it no longer revolves around one program. College football and the landscape as we know it no longer orbit the SEC or Alabama. I'm Cobalt Productions. Thank you for watching.